Okay, so welcome back to another podcast with Aeon Wraith and Red Shadow.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. We did start a little bit late today. That's simply because I feel very tired and I like to sleep. S- So,
Oh,
um, Shadow, what were some things you want to talk about today?
we didn't really have a whole lot on the agenda today, but we were going to talk about maybe games we're playing, things that we're, doing in our spare time when we're not working or being productive. Because, we have so much productivity.
Oh, so much.
Oh man! So you play anything interesting or new, or what kind of game has kind of got you, kind of locked in? Any games that you got that you just like wake up in the morning, you're like, huh, I
Y-
really kind of want to play that today.
Yeah, the past week really, I had seen a video about Sky Oblivion, which is a mod set in Skyrim to play Oblivion. And
Okay.
so I really like it got me kind of wanting to play Oblivion, so I went back and I've been playing Oblivion the past week. And
I have not played that in a while.
yeah. Now, whenever I play Oblivion though, there's a couple things I have to have, like there's a couple mods I have to be playing with.
Uh huh.
Uh like Skyrim, there's mods you play with, and yeah, it's kind of okay. But like Oblivion, like there's these two mods in particular that if I don't have, it will ruin my experience of the game.
And
One
what two
of
mods
them,
are those?
one of them is called Midas Magic,
I think
which
you've told me about that
mhm.
before.
Yeah, it's gone through some changes over the years, but essentially like um it gives you a new NPC who has researched magic in a different way, so you can
Mm-hmm.
use items and gold, like gold nuggets, to create spell effects. And so like one of the more useful spells, of course, is it's called Midas Chest. You go to his place, drop in a gold nugget, a lockpick, and a silver urn, and you have a summonable chest, which is great for dungeon diving.
Nice.
And the other one that's really really good that I have to have is called, what is it actually called? Enhanced Frostcrag Spire.
Uh huh.
So you know how they Frostcrag Spire is an actual DLC that was released by Bethesda,
I
and
believe so.
it's
Was that for
just
Oblivion?
yeah, for Oblivion. It's just like a mage's tower. It's like a house.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can get some steps there. I think yeah, she's part of that. You can like upgrade your place to where you've got like a vault and stuff like that, and you can have your own spell making and enchanting tables.
See, I had that mod when I had it on the Xbox 360, but I did not know that it had a name. I just always called it the Wizard Tower
Hmm.
mod or the Wizard Tower DLC.
Yeah, and so that was the official DLC. Well, somebody went and made a mod to really like make that a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So like they put a whole bunch of backstory into what the tower is, why it was given to you. Um, and it's just like it's one of those mods that like it's the same thing with the Dark Brotherhood quest line. You will sit there and you will play that whole little thing for 8 hours because you are just so entranced.
Right.
I mean, it's just a wonderfully written like story and mod, and that's like one of the things that like I do love those things where someone put their heart and soul into it, and you can tell that they love it. They love doing it, they love the finished product, and so that's those two mods again, like both of them put amazing amount of work into those two mods, the people that made them, and I really can't play Oblivion without them anymore because they just enhance every experience.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with enhancing your experience. I especially because you've played the game naturally,
Right.
with no mods before. See, one of the things that people always told me, growing up, especially whenever I got into mods and got a PC and stuff like that, is they were like, "Well, mods ruin the game." Well, I mean, yes and no. They thought of it as cheating, but I don't really think it's the same with GTA.
Hmm.
or the original GTA's. Like, if you've already beat the game, I see no reason
Hmm.
not to use cheats or, mods to enhance the experience, because if you've already beat the game, you have played it the way that the developers intended it to be played, and now you want to replay it again with new experiences.
Hmm. Because that to me is kind of like the whole speed running mentality,
Right.
right? Like you've played the game, you love the game, and yeah, you're looking for these exploits and bugs, but you still love the game at its heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was really into Paper Mario as a child. I don't know if you were. Did you have a
No, I
Nintendo?
never, I, I never played Paper Mario. My first, my family owned the NES, which is the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and we had Zelda and Mario and Duck Hunt, and then I didn't have another console at my house to play until I got my Game Boy Color
Mm.
in 2000. I think I got a Game Boy Color with Pokemon Crystal.
So like Paper Mario is an offshoot of the Mario RPG
Mm-hmm.
franchise, and it has this like sense of humor and world building that's different than the other Marios, but it's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's based on a longer story. I can't recall right now exactly how long the normal game actually takes. I want to say it's like
Mm-hmm.
20, 25 hours, if that. Um,
Yeah.
but they have cut it down with some of these exploits to like ridiculously short lengths, but they play it non-stop. Like they probably play that game more than someone who just played it once all the way through, right? Without those exploits.
Right, right.
So they're going for personal best, and they just enjoy the gameplay. At least I hope they enjoy the gameplay if they're playing it that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've watched. Me and Demon have watched some of the Zeldathon stuff and some of the other Zelda speedrun stuff. And there's a few YouTubers that I've seen that have done really fast, like Zelda playthroughs of like Ocarina of Time
Hmm.
and Majora's Mask and stuff like that. And I'm just like looking at these games, like these games when I first played them took me weeks to beat,
Right.
weeks to beat. And they're whipping them out and beating them in you know hours, if not less than hours.
Uh,
I'm not. I
I
haven't
don't.
seen them enough to know exactly how long it takes to beat them.
Not yeah, not to
I
go
would
back
need
to
I would
Mario.
need Demon for that.
Yeah, but not to go back to Mario. But Mario 64 is one of those a very big speedrunning scenes that is
Hmm.
broken up into like categories.
Right.
You've got your 120 star and get all stars. You've got your 70 stars, get the amount of stars you need to beat the game, and then it drops down to like 16, and then 1 star, and then the 0 star.
Hmm.
And some of those runs can take about a minute.
For
Like
the
for
100. So
for
is
the
it, you talking about like any completion speed runs or like 100%
yeah,
completion speed runs?
any complete or any percent. And so especially for the 0 star,
Uh-huh.
like you can beat that you beat the whole game essentially in a couple minutes because you glitch your way into the final boss fight. But sometimes like
That's
some of those
crazy.
techniques can take a long time to get right.
Hmm.
Like you can spend a couple hours trying to get that one technique down.
Yeah, there was a one specific instance in a speed run, and the guy needed to like he needed to stand on the corner of this one thing and then do a backflip and then do something else to like glitch through the wall.
Hmm.
And it took him about 3 or 4 tries because he was new to that particular glitch, but it shaved off like 3 hours of his total run
Hmm.
doing that one glitch. And I'm like thinking to myself, what what exactly, who thought to even try this in the
Yeah,
first place?
because there's some people in that community like they don't speed run games. Their whole objective is to find those glitches.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, like glitches where you can skip an entire chapter in a game, or where you can find a way to skip animations, right,
Mhm.
or cutscenes, because those will really, take time. And it's like, I don't know, exactly what their thought process is and how they test it, but it's like some of the stuff they find, it's like I would never have thought to even try that.
Mhm. Right. Oh, you're not. You're definitely not wrong. Um, I don't know how they think of it. I saw a video the other day. I didn't watch the whole thing because I was in my truck waiting for my son to get out of school, and it was like developers react to Hades, that
Yeah,
that new game being ran in like 37 minutes or something like that,
yeah.
and I was like, that's crazy because that game is supposed to take like a long time and have a lot of like
I
replayability and
think,
like
yeah,
lore and stuff like that, and then they're just like, bam, beat it,
took
37 minutes.
I think it took me a good 16 hours.
Yeah, I thought it was crazy.
Because I've seen more of those videos where like taking a game that's 120 hours and just it's done
Hmm.
in 10 minutes. And I put so much work into this scene and nobody saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's both sides, like play the game the way you love, and you really love that game, but appreciate, the time the developers did put into it.
Right. Yeah, I mean the developers, I mean they really, a lot of developers put in a lot of time to these games, and to be honest, like my thing is I don't want to get into the politics of the gaming world in this particular podcast, but like I just feel like in society, we've talked about it on the podcast multiple times, but we're a consumer, we're instant gratification culture, and I think that over the years of gaming and stuff like that, like some of the good games have been lost due to these things.
Hmm.
This instant gratification process. People don't want to play. I'm not saying there's still a lot of people out there that like to play the older games because they're rewarding,
Hmm.
but it's just like all these, and there's nothing wrong with BRs, but like a lot of people are into BRs because they're instant gratification. You hop in, you do your thing, you can hop off.
Hmm.
But some of the older games, like they're more in detail, they're more in depth. You can't just some of them you can't just log on for 15, 20 minutes and get anything accomplished, you know.
Hmm.
Some of the even though Skyrim is a little bit newer game, some of the Skyrim missions, take 30, 45 minutes to do the whole mission. You can't just, if you've got a little bit of free time, you can't just hop on, complete a whole mission and hop off.
Hmm.
You don't really feel satisfied as.
It's funny. You and I talk about this a lot in our personal life, just how similar we kind of are. And
Mhm.
this is not on purpose, but I was having almost the same exact conversation last night with one of my brothers, just
Mhm.
about games and stuff, and we were kind of talking about how our favorite period in gaming is really like 1998 to 2005.
Mhm.
And that's not just because of nostalgia, that's not just because that's like when we were growing up, but like one of my favorite games of all time is
Mhm.
Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic,
I think I've played that.
which is a very story-based game, and it's definitely not something that you said, you can't jump in for 15 minutes because you'll get nothing done. You might have
Yeah.
you might have one conversation in the game in 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And it's one of those games that, just has so much about it that worked really well. I mean, it's kind of outdated now in terms of mechanics,
Mhm.
but it's frustrating to see some of the games of today not taking the lessons that games like, Knights of the Old Republic or some of those other games from 2005, Morrowind, or my one of my favorite games, Gothic 2. Taking some of the things that really made playing fun and keeping them. They've really changed it to, well, one of the things, of course, is trying to attract a broader audience, which
Hmm.
is business, and I can understand that. But at the same time, when they try to do that, they kind of dull down the game, right? Because they want it to be
Right.
available to the largest number of people,
Hmm.
which is kind of like I don't know if you ever watch like film reviews or critiques and stuff like that,
I
but
don't. Not very rarely. Sometimes, but very rarely.
so we can agree on the fact that Pirates of the Caribbean was a very successful franchise.
Yes.
Um, can we agree on the fact that it declined somewhat after the first movie?
The first movie, I watched the first movie. I had no idea what Pirates of the Caribbean was when I watched the first movie. It
Hmm.
was actually pretty funny. I think about it all the time because I really love the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Hmm.
The first time I ever saw it, I was staying with my dad's second wife. They were together and they were living together, and or they moved in together, and so I was staying there with them. And I watched a lot of DVDs when I was younger, because we didn't have cable. I didn't have cable at my mom's house. I didn't have cable at my dad's house. I didn't have cable anywhere.
Hmm.
Watch DVDs, and she had a lot of interesting DVDs in her cabinet, and I was just going through them over the summer break of school, and I was just watching DVDs, and I watched The Postman. I'd never seen that movie
Oh yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah,
It was
yeah,
a
yeah.
great movie, but one of them was Pirates of the Caribbean, and I kept skipping over it because, like, oh, I was looking at the cover, and I was like, oh, they just don't look all that great. They don't look all that great. And one day I was like, I had watched like almost every other movie except for like two or three, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it. Put it in, started watching this movie, and it had me like on the edge of my seat for the
Hmm.
whole movie. I was like, this movie is so awesome. And then I found out that there was a second one that was already out. Like it was already out, I think, whenever I watched the first one.
Hmm.
And I watched it and I was like, it's good, but it's not as good as the first one,
Hmm.
you know? And my thing is like I don't know. Like my thing is like I do agree. Okay? Like to the root of the point, I do agree. The franchise went down severely after the first movie. The second movie was good. It wasn't great. But then after the third movie, it kind of went down, like really downhill.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Is it is it's the first one and then the second one, and then is the third one at World's End, or is that the fourth one?
Yeah, that's the third one.
Which one's Dead Men Tell No Tales?
That's the second one.
No, it's not, because the second one's the Davy Jones Dead
Yeah,
Man's
that.
Chest.
Oh, oh,
No,
Dead
yeah,
Men Tell No Tales.
it's like the fourth or the fifth. I don't know how many there are now, to be honest with you.
There's like six or something. I don't know. It's not good.
That one, the Dead Men Tell No Tales was actually pretty decent compared to like the other ones that they had. Um, but nowhere near as good as the first.
hmm But like, so like that's kind of the thing. Like they started trying to take like the character that everybody loved in the first one, right? Jack
Hmm.
Sparrow, who was a very nuanced character. They really thought him out, and they spent the next several movies kind of trying to increase his not his likability, but his overall charisma to the general audience. And so,
Hmm.
they started having to make more and more jokes as the series goes on. And
Right.
I think it's the most recent one. There's a scene where it's like Jack isn't even intelligent anymore. He's
Hmm.
just a bumbling idiot.
Right.
And it's like they got to that point because they kept trying to do, general audience stuff. And it's like you've forgotten what made the character so great in the first one. The fact
Right.
that Jack wasn't just, you know, kind of dopey, in some of the stuff that he did, but he was a very intelligent man,
Right.
who could strategize. And, you kind of have to do that if you're doing a ship. You have to be able to see into the future and see what you need to do rather than just reacting all the time.
Right.
And I
Eh,
just see so many other franchises like they'll have a really great premise and then they try like the second season or second movie they try to increase their audience range and it just loses some of that touch.
you said you were saying games, from 90, you said 98 to 2005.
Yeah.
Like the same thing can be said for movies. You know,
Mhm.
I miss the days like I haven't seen a movie that's come out recently, um, or maybe even in the last 5 or 10 years that there. I mean, I'm not saying there are none.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is when I think of movies from like the late '80s to the mid '90 area, or even all the way up till 2000, there was elements of everything in these movies. Like
Mhm.
you would have some comedy, some suspense, a little bit of horror, action. Like there was character development, there was plot,
Mhm.
I mean there was rise and falling actions, very good cinematic, you know. But then there's a lot of movies that they're making today or in the last 5 or 10 years that really just are one genre action movie. The
Mhm.
whole thing is action. There's just action, 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 action. And there's not really any character development. It's just rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall,
You
and then the
know,
movie's over.
when you bring up that particular thing, there's a movie that comes to mind,
Uh huh.
which is The Expendables.
The Expendables. Yeah.
Because it's just hard-paced action. Like there's a lot of stuff going on screen, and it's very action-packed. But I'll tell you what, like it doesn't grip me the way that some other movies like when they have like a brief action scene do, where it's integral to the plot.
Mhm.
Because fun enough, one of my favorite action movies is actually kind of a comedy. It's Last Action Hero
Mhm.
because they take that trope, kind of like the 80s action movie where it's just action for machismo's sake, and they
Right.
they turn it into a commentary.
Mhm.
um and I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I've seen
and
it. It's been a while, but yes, I have seen that movie.
and for some, like it didn't do like terribly well, you know
Yeah.
in the box office, but like I think like after it came out like, on DVD, or no, at that time it would have been video cassette. uh People were like, no, yeah, this is actually a really great movie.
Right.
And you also have things like Galaxy Quest, things that like they're not action packed, but the
Mhm.
action scenes that they have grip you because you're
Right.
invested in the characters. You're invested in whether the characters survive. Whereas in something like the Expendables, one of them could die, and you're just like, oh, well, that's the battlefield.
Yeah. I mean, they tried. I'm not gonna say that they completely didn't try on a story. They tried on a story, but there was too much extra
Hmm.
to really tell a story.
And
That's one of
yeah.
the things I love about watching movies or playing games. Um, which was our original topic was I like the story.
Hmm.
Like I like the character building. I like the lore building. You
Hmm.
know, a lot of people, you know, the Lord of the Rings books is a great series of books. The movies I felt weren't as like close to the like if they had made the movies as long as the books, the
Hmm.
movies would have been way longer.
Yeah.
But I think that they did a very good job with what they did have.
Hmm.
You know, um, I wish that they had made like the Harry Potter books or the movies
Hmm.
longer because they could have added in some extra stuff that was in the books, you
Right.
know. But they build character, they build the world, they have, development,
'Cause
you
it's
know.
It's funny you mentioned Lord of the Rings because for the movies, right?
Hmm.
Um there's the extended cuts, which
Right.
like when you watch them all back to back, it's like, oh God, 17 hours or something. It's like ridiculously long. Um,
I
but
think I think I have the extended cuts. I was thinking that they're. I don't think any one of them is over 4 hours long.
because I don't know if when the internet talks about the Lord of the Rings if they're including the Hobbit or not.
I don't know.
But one of the characters in there, Boromir from the first movie,
Hmm.
in the extended cuts, he has many other scenes in the second and third movie to explain his character,
Hmm.
which really go into depth to show you that character, and they're great scenes. But the things with movies is that you have to worry about pacing, you
Right.
know, and sometimes like if you're watching Frodo about to be eaten by a spider, you don't necessarily want to see a flashback with Boromir and his brother.
Right.
Even though those scenes are actually very important in characterization, sometimes it just doesn't work.
It's that consumer culture.
Hmm.
Back again. It really. Like there are movie there. The thing I hate about is like books that they make or movies that they make from books that don't follow the book.
Oh God,
Aragon
that's
is
exactly the
my
movie that came
biggest.
to mind.
That is the biggest example, and I know you've talked about it a lot, but I've seen the movie. If I never heard of the book ever, the movie would be decent. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not a bad movie, but when you compare it to what you know the story is supposed to be, you're just like, what were they thinking?
Hmm.
The series of events is out of order in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I don't even think does he even see the dragon in the first book? The not his dragon, obviously, but the red dragon. Does he even see it in the first book? I don't think so.
I
But
don't think so.
it's in the movie.
I don't know that. Yeah, man, that movie just made me so mad, and it still makes me mad.
Like
Same thing with the
Ender's
Avatar.
Game.
Oh
Did you
yeah,
see the Ender's
well
Game movie?
yeah, Ender's Game. That was actually like it was a
The
good
movie's
movie,
the movie's
but
not bad,
yeah,
but
it's just
there's a lot of the events are out of place.
out of place. And then like a big part of Ender's Game in particular is that it's not so much a story driven book, right? It's a character driven book. It's about Ender and his experiences, which is
Right,
hard to do in a constrained time of 2 hours, right? Because
right.
just in the first book alone, you go from when he's like 6 to when he's 12 or 14.
Yeah, it covers quite a bit of time. To be honest, I've read that book probably 10 times and I couldn't tell you exactly the ages because I'm always so fascinated with the story and what he's doing that
Hmm.
I just kind of skip over that. It's kind of like me and you. We talked about this one time. I don't know if you remember, but we were talking about the Wheel of Time
Hmm.
by Robert Jordan. And you asked me, you said, when you think of Rand, how do you think of him in your head? And I'm like, I don't know, tall, kind of
Hmm.
muscular, brown hair. And
Right.
you're like, it says in his character description he has red hair.
Yeah, because like when I was reading the book series, like they mentioned that, in the very beginning, and like I just glazed over it, and it wasn't until later in the series where like, that becomes an important character trait where like everyone
Hmm.
starts looking at that. It's like, "Oh, I completely forgot that."
Yeah, because I saw this on Reddit a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about how you imagine. I can't remember the exact wording of the question, but it was like they were asking other redditors how they perceive characters. Do they build a new character like in their head based on the book, or
Mm.
do you build your mental image of a character based off of their what they do and what they stand for? Do you use actors from movies in place of characters? Do you use people you know? And it got me to thinking about what I do, and I do a little bit of all of it,
Mhm.
well, except for the people I know. Usually I don't imagine people I know in books,
Aw,
but
give me.
like there are some um I was trying to think of a really good example, but I can't think of one right off the top of my head. But well, like if I were to reread the Harry Potter books, right?
Mhm.
I'm probably gonna imagine the people from the movies because I've seen the movies so many times and I've read the books so many times that they kind of mesh together,
Mhm.
right? Um, but when I read Ender's Game, I don't see Ender from the movie. I
No.
see my own version of him. It's
Well,
just
yeah.
like, Rand from The Wheel of Time. Like I see my own version of him.
Mhm.
Like it
And
doesn't look like a person or an actor or anything like that.
it's like it's when you first start reading, and they introduce the character, you get this snapshot of their personality, and you get some character traits, hair and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And in that moment, your brain just immediately makes, what your visualization of them is, and
Mhm.
you just kind of stick with that. And it's all done in like milliseconds. You don't even realize you're doing it, because
Yeah.
and then of course when someone makes a movie, you're like, that is not how that character looks at all.
Yeah, that's not how that character looks. But on the flip side, the first time I ever even the first time I ever even learned this was on Reddit. Although I knew that it existed to an extent, when I read, and I think when you read, because we've talked about it before, in real life, when we read, we imagine the world, we see the world,
Hmm.
we see the characters, we see what they're doing. I don't know how many times, me and Demon have been in the kitchen and we've been talking about something or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back to watching my movie. Oh, wait, no, I'm not watching a movie. I'm reading a book because it's so real in my
Hmm.
mind that even whenever I'm not reading the book, when I'm standing there making my food or whatever, I'm seeing what I was reading still in my mind. So when I think back on it, I don't think back on the words that I was reading. I think back on what I was seeing as I read the words.
Right.
And
Hmm.
a lot of people say they don't like reading. And I didn't know this, but not everybody gets visualizations when they read.
Oh yeah, yeah. Some people don't have
Um,
that inner eye, or even inner
w-
voice, for that matter.
one of the things that I read on Reddit that just boggled my mind was they were like, when I read, all I can see in my head is the words that I'm reading, and I'm like, that's got to be so boring. Like,
Hmm.
if I were to read and that's all I were to see would be words that I'm reading, like just the words pictured in my head, just letter after letter, or line after line.
Hmm.
I don't know that I would like to read.
And it's fair. I mean, some people don't like to read, and that's fine. It's just that you and I and my family in general, we like to read because of that immersiveness, right? Because you can really
Mhm.
get into a book, you know, and I mean get really into the book. Like how many times have you started a book, gotten into it, and then stayed up all night to finish it?
A lot of times.
Right, and like there's some things that like people can get passionate about, and there's some people who are not passionate about reading, but they're passionate about other things, you know,
Mhm.
because on an emotional and an intellectual level, they connect with those things, in ways that I definitely can't explain, because I can't break down for you exactly why I love books so much, right? It's just that I do.
Mhm.
I can try to give examples and stuff, but really that's just a part of who I am.
Right.
I am a reader, and so like I can point out certain things, but that's just who I am as a person, and everybody has something that they're really into. I've met a couple different people who are really really into cars, and engines and stuff, and to me that's boring. I have no interest in that, but then they talk about
Mhm.
it very passionately, you know, because they enjoy it. And whenever
Right.
there's a new car reveal, they go and watch the different YouTube videos of people test driving and stuff. And
You can always tell. You can
go ahead.
always tell when somebody's passionate about something or they really into something is they'll be talking about it, and even though you have no idea what they're saying, they're just still talking about it because they like it,
Mhm.
and it brings them joy to talk to others about it,
Mhm.
even if they might not understand it. I have a coworker that's just really into like guns,
Yeah.
like rifles and stuff like that. And he was talking about a gun the other day. He's like, "Yeah, I really." He's like, "When I get off work, I'm gonna go buy this new gun." And he was talking about it. I have no idea what he's talking about because I don't know anything about guns.
Mhm.
And he was like, "I already have 5 of this gun, but this one's a different brand. Same type of gun, but it's a different brand." And I'm like, 5 of the same gun. But that's something he's very passionate about. That's what he likes to spend his money on,
At the
you
same,
know?
yeah, I mean, like to bring it back to reading, or video
Mhm,
games even. Honestly, we kind of have the same thing, right? Like there's games that are very similar, that we
mhm.
already own and can play at any time, but we go and buy a new one because
Right.
reasons.
Well, I mean, I buy new games because I'm looking for that feeling. When I played StarCraft 2 for the very first time,
Uh-huh.
it was one of the very first RTS games that I had ever played. A real-time strategy. Didn't think I'd even like it.
Mhm.
And I was playing through the campaign and I just fell in love with this real-time strategy, top down, controlling your armies. And that led me into Command and Conquer, which I think is actually a little bit older than StarCraft 2,
Mhm.
because I was playing Tiberium Wars.
Yeah.
And I really got into those games. Like, I loved those games. But and I can go back and play those games. But some of the newer ones I don't like. I like those games because those are the ones that I played, and they're the ones that I enjoy. Prototype.
Oh yeah, I really
I
yeah.
can go back. I can go back and play Prototype 1 or Prototype 2 anytime, and even if I don't play them I'll play the whole game from start to finish. But I'll play it for a couple hours just because it's a fun game. It's got nice mechanics. It's fun.
Mhm.
You know, Skyrim. To be honest, I play Skyrim occasionally, not as much as I used to. But even when I did, I would start it. I would be like, okay, I'm gonna start a new game. I'm gonna
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to be a two-handed orc, and then within an hour, I'm a stinky archer. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
really know exactly how that works, but apparently, I'm not the only one that does that.
No. And it's like uh to come full circle, I guess. When I play Oblivion, or when I started playing Oblivion this past week,
Hmm.
I had decided that I was going to play a up in front Basham heavy armor, wielder,
Hmm.
and I've still been pretty much doing that. Well, I mean, like the other thing is to level up, I was having to use destruction. So now instead of it being up front heavy armor with my mace, it's that with magic, right? But I didn't
Wow.
necessarily
Uh huh.
transition to an entirely separate class
Hmm.
because it made the game easier. Because and this is my opinion on the earlier Elder Scrolls, right? When you decide your base skills, that
Right.
really changes how you play the game. Like so, I had set my skills around being, that kind of player, and you can go and try to be a different type. Like you can, if you put all your points into like sword fighting and stuff like that, and you're like, you know what, I want to be an archer. You can do that. It is going to be very hard because you are massively
Right.
underleveled.
Right.
Because like your arrows won't do as much damage, especially um, you know, when it came to your strength being a big component of damage and your weapon skill. And I was just so disappointed when Skyrim took out attributes, when
Hmm.
they took out strength and luck and agility, because to me that took away the core of what it meant to be a role-playing game.
Right.
To design your character and build them the way you want to. Because my goal every time I play Skyrim is not to level up or anything like that. It's to get all my skills to 100. Every skill. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Even though, they are all massively different um, gameplay styles, I still try to get every skill to 100 simply because I like the hundreds. But,
Yeah.
you know, at some point when you're doing that, it feels more like a chore than a game. You know,
Right.
you're not enjoying the experience.
Well, no, because at that point you're kind of looking at it more like a job than
Mhm.
a game. You're like, "Oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that." And then when you put constraints on anything, really, uh, it changes your perception of it. Anytime, and this goes beyond games, it even extends into life. Anytime you put a goal, when you set that goal, you have just now set a rule and an expectation to live up to that goal,
Mhm.
and it feels like work, you know. Um, like even like say for example, I a couple of years ago I set a goal. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to read 100 books this year. I think I ended up reading 100 books that year, but when I first started out, I was thinking along those lines. I'm gonna read 100 books this year. I'm gonna read
Mhm.
100 books this year. And I would like start to read, and then I would be like, you know what? Like I just really don't want to read today. Like I felt like I was forcing myself to read because I had set this goal of being able to or reading 100 books. But once I stopped thinking of it like, oh, I'm going to read 100 books, and it was like, oh, I'm just going to read for fun. It was easy to knock those books out.
Mhm.
You know, I knocked out like 5 in 1 month, if not 10 or 20.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
depending on the length of the book. I mean, I read pretty quickly, so I mean, depending on the book, it's anywhere from, I can take, and depending on my time, because if I'm working a lot, I don't have as much time to read.
Right. And of course, there's some books that you've read so much that like it's not so much that you're reading them as reliving them, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll see one of the words on the page and that just starts like a landslide in your brain of all of the other images, that you had seen. Like you're saying like you're watching a movie when reading a
Hmm.
book. And how many times is it in life where you see some small detail and it just reminds you of a memory? And
Oh,
it's
all the time.
and it's very much similar in reading where it's like if you're going back to reread book, I know not everybody rereads books, you know, but you go back and reread a book many times because you enjoy it, you're like, as soon as you start seeing that little bit of it, you already start playing it in your head and you're seeing the entire journey in your head
Hmm.
and you're just flipping the page
Right.
just to keep yourself on
Um,
track.
the one series that I can just sit there and the more I think about it, the more story just flows through my head. Is the Sword of Truth series.
Hmm.
I've read every book in that I've read every book in the series at least 3 or 4 times. And my favorite books I've read 10,
Yeah.
20 times. I've read the first one probably 15, 20 times. I've read the second one probably 10, at least 10.
Hmm.
And then the sixth one I've probably read 15 or 20 times. The first and sixth are my favorites out of that series.
Is the
The
sixth
second
one
one,
Naked Empire?
sixth is Faith of the Fallen,
Oh, yeah.
where
Okay,
he
that's
goes to the
yeah. I always, for some reason, I always get that title wrong, but I know which book you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. Faith of the Fallen is number 6. The Naked Empire is number 8.
Okay, but no, I agree. Like that, the first book and Faith of the Fallen, really, in my opinion, are the best books in the series. Like I
Hmm.
really enjoy those books because they really focus around Richard as a person.
Yes.
And one of the things that I mean, like it makes sense, but like the other books start to focus him more as Lord Rawl, right?
Right.
But to me, he will always be Richard Cypher.
Right.
Uh, and when he is Richard Cypher, when he's just being Richard, I love those moments.
Yeah.
Not when he's doing something because he's the seeker of truth, but when he's doing something because that's what he does.
Yeah. That's what makes that was the whole point of the books, is like that's why he is such a good seeker, is because of who he is.
Hmm.
Like that's why they say over and over and over again, like he's the seeker. Like the sword is just like a tool. Like even if he didn't have the sword, he would still be a seeker of truth. Is
Right.
because that's just who he is as a person. But you're right. He gets caught up in the politics and stuff like that. But that's not because of. It's not his fault. I mean,
Right.
it's just like to get what to save the people that he wants to save, he has to.
Mhm. Because there's one point in the first book. Spoilers for anyone who has not read this book, by the way. There is one point in the first book that always kind of puts me off. It's the one scene in the first book or section that I don't necessarily like reading. Um, which is when he gets imprisoned. I'm just gonna put it that way so it doesn't spoil too much. But
Right.
that whole section of the book, it just feels like an aside to me.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't invested in that section, and I'm even going back and rereading it again and again and again. And I know it has an effect on who he is as a person later, but I can't immerse myself in that sequence the way I can,
Right.
any other time when he's going through the veil for the first time. I love that scene.
Hmm.
You know, or just him and Kalan running through the forest trying to get away from excuse me, Darkenral's forces. Like
Hmm.
I can really get behind those. Excuse me,
Right.
hold on. But then there are other, like that's the only part in the first book that really kind of takes me out of the experience.
Hmm.
And I know it has a point, but
Yeah.
it feels different.
I mean, whenever you read anything that doesn't really resonate with you, it, it's off-putting. You
Hmm.
know. Um, Me personally, I like the books, and I even like the part where he's imprisoned. Because to me, while the imprisonment was horrible for him, to me it resonates with me because I've felt like that before, trapped and
Hmm.
unable to get to the ones that I love because of you know life,
Yeah.
you know and so like the whole book I just really resonate with. Out of every book that I've ever read, that particular series is got to be hands down my favorite series.
Speaking
Um,
of, rest in peace to Terry Goodkind.
right, right.
Yeah, just want to say that before I forgot. Yeah, because it is like an amazing series, and that I'll be honest, that probably really affected who I am as a person because I started
Hmm.
reading those books in middle school and then stuck with the series up until it finished, which was 10, 15 years later.
Yeah.
And like it's there was a great series of books. I mean, there was a couple here and there that were not as good, but that's just because they didn't
Hmm.
focus on Richard, right?
Right.
You know, fifth book, you know, ugh,
Soul of Fire.
yeah, hate that kid, hate that kid.
I know. I don't like him either. My thing is like the the thing that I loved about the series is even though there were parts of the books that I didn't like and there were other characters I didn't like,
Hmm.
I just loved how everything tied together through the books. It's like
Hmm.
he knew how the story was going to flow from beginning to end, and he was able to tie everything in. Like there were things that you needed from book 3 when you were reading book 8 or book 7, and there were things from like book 5 that you needed when you were reading book 9, and
Hmm.
like just like little different like little like build-ups that at the time were like, oh, this is not really important, that became important later because you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense
Hmm.
now, you
Yeah,
know.
well, because like the fifth book, A Soul of Fire, like it's very important, in the overall
Mhm.
series. It's just that like the way it's told, we don't necessarily get on board. But he did that on purpose to try
Mhm.
and build up. the expectation that you could see things from other people's perspective, and
Hmm.
that's why is that I can't remember which book this is. The one where there's a book later on where you start to see through other people's perspectives, and it's a good book. You don't necessarily hate those characters just because they're there. You hate them because they're terrible people.
Right. I think it's in book 7, Pillars of Creation, where
Yes. Hmm.
you get the his you get the one dude's point of view and you get the girl's point of view.
Yeah. And he had done like especially Soul to Fire, so he could kind of set up in the world, or in even in his books that he could do something like that because it's very like, and I think it's the reason why most people that I've talked to that have read the book series don't like Soul of Fire is it's jarring the very first time you switch to another character's perspective after almost never doing that, especially if it's not a main character.
Hmm.
Of
Yeah,
course, yeah.
because these characters, while they were important to the overall story, they're not even really side characters. They're
Mm-mm.
just random people.
Yeah. Um, I blanked. Oh
Uh,
man, I'm tired. Okay. I was
yeah,
gonna say
yeah, yeah.
something.
No,
I was gonna say something and I completely blanked.
the other I mean, there's been other good book series that I've read. This
Hmm.
is this is this is just one that I find the most entertaining and the most fun, the most uh, for me rereadable. I know, and to be honest, like part of me feels I don't really believe in destiny, quote unquote, but I do believe that I was kind of destined to read this book because when I met you, in I think we met in the 8th grade. It was when we very, very first spoke to each other
Hmm.
because we were both sitting on that wall in junior high, and you were reading books and I was reading books. And I'm not sure if I spoke to you first. You probably spoke to me first because I didn't talk to nobody unless they talked to me first. And we were talking about books, and like that's how our friendship started, was us
Hmm.
sitting on that wall talking about books. And I remember you were talking about two different series of books. You were talking about The Keys to the Kingdom,
I still love
uh,
that series.
and no, was it Keys to the Kingdom? Keys to the Kingdom is Keys to the Kingdom
Oh, I,
Garth Nix,
yes, yeah, because
but
he
it
had
wasn't. It
ah,
was you were talking about the Sword of Truth. I don't think it was Keys to the Kingdom though.
was it the
What
Seventh Tower?
the Seventh Tower? You were talking about the Seventh Tower, and you were talking about the Sword of Truth.
Hmm.
And you told me that the Sword of Truth was a little more complicated because we had just become friends. We didn't really have a good feeling for like each other's intelligence levels and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And you were telling me that the Sword of Truth was a little more complicated series, and you thought maybe if I were to read a series, I should probably start with the Seventh Tower. And so I read the Seventh Tower series. I can't remember if you loaned them to me or
I
if
think I
I
did. I think I
got them
loaned them
from the
to you.
library. But I read the Seventh Tower series and I enjoyed it. And after that, I started reading something else, but it was from the library, and so I didn't borrow any more books from you. And I was at a flea market with my grandfather, and I, anytime I go to a flea market or like a resale shop or anything, I've got to go look at the books. Even when I go to the dollar store, I got to go look at the books because you never know. I found one of the Wheel of Time series books, a nice big hardback version.
Hmm.
I think it's of like the eighth or ninth book. It
Mm.
was like a $20 book. I found it at the dollar store for $1.
Nice.
But we were at this flea market, or this um wasn't a flea market. I had the word a while ago. Was it a flea market? I don't know. Anyway, so we're at this flea market, right? And I'm looking around at the books and stuff like that, and there wasn't any there was one particular little like booth that had a lot of books.
Mhm.
and they just didn't have anything good. They were all like romance novels and stuff like that. And I'm just not into those. I mean, if
Right.
you are, if you're into those, that's great. More power to you. It's just not my forte. Except for Twilight. I like Twilight. I don't care. Judge me as you will.
Oh, I'm gonna
Um,
judge you.
but I'm reading Midnight Sun. Like literally, I was reading that before the podcast for like the fourth time, which is Twilight from Edward's perspective. But
Mhm.
I don't care. Uh, I like it. But anyway, so I'm in the flea market right now. I go in this other booth and I see a few books in the back and I'm like looking at these books and still nothing. And I turn to walk out of the booth and on the floor, kind of slid up under the counter at an angle, is a book. And I like stop and I reach down and I pick it up and I look at the cover, and on the cover of this book is a red dragon and a dude sitting on his back with a sword in his hand. And I'm just like, I gotta have this book.
Mhm.
Like, I judged a book by the cover. I've done it 100 times, and I'll probably do it 100 more before my life is over, if not more than that. I judged a book by its cover. I looked on it. It was like 50 cents, and I was like, I'm buying it. So I went to the counter and I bought it, and I started reading it, and I really liked it. It was called The Wizard's First Rule, you know. And I was reading it, and then I got like halfway through the book, and I was at school one day, and I was telling you about this book, and I was like, man, I really like this book. If I when I get done with it, maybe you should read it. And I was explaining it and describing it to you, and you're like, that's the Sword of Truth. And I'm like, what? I said, no, it's not. It's called The Wizard's First Rule. And you're like, that's what the first book is called. But I didn't know that
Right. Mhm.
because you'd always just called it the Sword of Truth. I thought that was the name of the book. I didn't realize it was the name of the series and the
Mhm.
names of the books were different. And so I went and I started looking at the book, and sure enough, on the spine it says a Sword of Truth novel.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. So I picked this book up randomly at a flea market and started reading it, and it was just happened to be a series of books that you told me that was really good that I should read.
Mhm.
You know, and that copy was actually, I think, a first edition, even though it was kind of tattered and it was a paperback, because in the very first on the very after the forward and everything, it said Sword of Truth series, and then it said Wizard's First Rule, and then right underneath that it said Wizard's Second Rule, but that was not the name of the second book.
No, the Stone of Tears. Yeah.
He changed it. It was going to be the Wizard's rules, right? It was going to be Wizard's first rule, Wizard's second, Wizard's third, and he changed it so that they had actual titles.
Mhm.
And I still find that cool. I still have that paperback, even though it's about to fall apart now because I've read it so many times. I read it so many times and it's so fragile now that I bought the ebook on my phone so
Mhm.
that I don't want to ruin the book, but I still want to be able to read it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, books to me, books can take you places that nothing else can. Like
Mhm.
books, obviously, technically, it's imagination can take you places that no one else can. But the books drive my imagination.
Mhm.
For me personally, books drive my imagination more than anything else can, other than anxiety. My anxiety can really drive my imagination
Yeah.
crazy. It gets behind the steering wheel and it like floors it like it's driving a Bugatti or a Lamborghini and doing like 200 miles an hour while it's snowing during an earthquake.
Yeah.
Like
Things that come up, it's like, "Well, but what if this happened? There's literally that's like 1,000,000 to 1 chance. But what if it
like literally
happened?
there was one time I can't remember what I was doing and I was like, well, what if a meteor comes flying out of the sky and were to hit me in the head? Like what are the chances of that happening? Like 1,000,000,000 to 1?
I'm
But
not. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie.
anxiety brought it up.
I'm not gonna lie. That actually goes through my head a lot when I'm driving.
Oh yeah.
Where like I'm headed home. I'm like, God, it would suck just to get hit by a meteor right now. Because it's like I'm sure that's how I'd go. Just a meteor hits my car, and I'm the only one who gets hit, which is not how meteors work, but that's how it goes in my head.
Another series of books that I really enjoyed, even though I think they're technically young adult
I mean, yeah,
fiction, is The Ranger's Apprentice.
I enjoyed. Okay, I really,
I
really
enjoyed
liked
them
it up until the time
until
skip.
7, right?
Yeah,
Was 7
book five, I think book five for me.
7 was, if I'm not mistaken, Eric's Ransom,
Yeah,
which is the one where he goes to the other nation. No, yeah, no,
yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah,
because like the reason why the series kind of lost me is that you start out is the character's name Will?
yeah,
Okay, yeah, yeah. Because I always remember Holt or Halt,
yeah.
but
Halt is his.
mhm,
Uh,
but I always forget his name. So it starts out,
yeah,
when he starts to become the apprentice, and you have the first, 3 or 4 books, which are all about him being the apprentice, which is really good. But
hmm,
then in the fourth or the fifth book, it skips forward to, well, he's no longer an apprentice, right? He's just a
right,
straight ranger, and you have that for 2 books, and that's why I guess where maybe the author or the publishing company or someone realized, but now he's not an apprentice, so they decided to go back in time to when he was an apprentice. But to me, that felt like whiplash
yeah,
because
th- th-
I and it's like this whenever I see a lot of different like prequels and stuff like that, where
mhm,
I've seen who the character becomes and they're set a certain way, but when you do prequels, you're creating something new.
right.
And like, how many times have you seen a prequel that has something that's like, well, why didn't we know this originally? Because this is a very big moment. So one I'm going to bring up is Monsters Inc.
Okay, okay, yeah, I
Uh,
can see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so Monsters Inc., they've got screams as energy, sort of
Hmm.
thing. But in the prequel, in Monsters University, they discover near the end, spoilers, that the scream, like the actual terrified scream of an adult, like human, especially many of them, has far more power than the child's scream because they use it to
Hmm.
create a door to go back home. And it's like, if you
Yeah,
have this kind of knowledge now, why are you not like, why is that not even mentioned? As because like that's like huge, that's like a breakthrough,
right.
and it's not even mentioned. So like, why is it at that point when they're like, well, scares aren't giving us enough power, it's like, well, of course you're targeting the wrong thing, you're targeting the children, should be going for the adults with their super massive screams instead of their laughs. And it's just like
Another.
things like that where they do a prequel not
Uh-huh.
really understanding the effect it has on the original story.
I Part of me thinks that they just don't really care
Mm,
what effects it has on the future story. One of the things, it's not a huge thing, and I understand that it is, I guess it is a little debatable. One of the things that always bugged me was, and it's technically not a prequel. It's just it's a movie that happens in the same universe at an earlier time period, and that
mm.
is the Crimes of Grindelwald,
Oh
or
yeah,
the
yeah,
Fantastic Beasts movies, right?
yeah.
They're set in the same universe as Harry Potter, but they're set much earlier,
Yeah, and these events aren't
and
even mentioned in the Harry Potter books. Or
none.
barely.
Yeah, the events are barely mentioned, but I kind of understand that from a little bit of perspective, because like of where they take place.
Hmm.
Um, but the biggest thing is in one of the movies, he Grindelwald, who, so I guess spoiler alert, who is disguised as somebody else. He casts a couple. There's a couple of times in the movie where he casts spells without picking up his wand or without saying anything.
Hmm.
He just does the magic. And there are a couple of instances in Harry Potter where that is kind of a thing, but like nobody talks about it. Like
Hmm.
nobody mentions it. Everybody's like, you have to have a wand to cast spells. but obviously you don't have to have them in your hand.
Because I'll say one
And
one thing about yeah, I guess not necessarily prequels, but about Fantastic Beasts that always gets me is the heavy use of teleportation magic,
mhm,
right? Which is just like there's a whole bunch of stuff in the in the books, in the Harry Potter books, that would have been very useful if the teachers or even if Dumbledore was using teleportation magic,
yeah,
which he is obviously capable of.
right,
He was the most powerful wizard, and it's just like especially when you're doing prequels or anything set before, and you're adding powers to try and raise the scale, which is what you have to do when you're making something
right,
afterwards. You have to raise the scale. It jeopardizes the overall integrity of the story previously, because if that exists, why didn't they use it? Like, okay, so another example for Harry Potter that a lot of my writing like podcasts and stuff have been talking about is she's very good at like keeping things straight in each book, but
mhm,
between books she's not very good. For example, book 3, my favorite book of the series,
mhm,
The Time Turner.
right,
That is an immensely useful object that is never used again.
right.
And it's just those kind of things that just they don't necessarily make you dislike the series, they just make you frustrated. Because you're thinking, well, what if they had used this? It would have been so much better. I mean, part of that is especially, I'm not the writer, I had no idea where the story was going,
Yeah,
but at the same time, I really liked that concept and I wanted it to come back.
right. The third book was my favorite for a very long time. But after rereading them, I probably reread them at least 5 times all the way through.
Hmm.
I have to say that the third book changed from being my first favorite to my second favorite, and I think Half Blood Prince is actually my first
Half Blood
favorite.
Prince was pretty good. That definitely is up there.
I I just really really liked kind of the backstory that you get of
Hmm.
Snape in that
Yeah.
book, and also like the like I just thought that the Half Blood Prince's book was awesome.
Yeah.
Even before I knew whose it belonged to, like I just really liked that. Like I just was like, man, this is so cool. He's just like whoever had this book was like a genius.
Hmm.
Like
I,
I just really
yeah.
like that story.
I will say, in my personal opinion, and I'm sure, this is going to differ from many other people,
Oh
Order
yeah,
of the Phoenix was the weakest book. Um, I didn't necessarily enjoy that book as much, simply because I don't like those themes,
yeah,
right, of authoritarian
uh huh,
control.
right,
And you know, I liked to read about the fantastical, and these amazing situations that Harry would get into, and it's like, ah, that's reminding me of some real world stuff that I kind of don't want to be reminded about right now. And
yeah.
I've never liked stories that kind of deal in that, even because I know, like, yes, they're being played as the bad guy and it's supposed to show authoritarian regimes are not good, but they still make me feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I could agree with that. I don't know that everybody else would agree with our assessment,
Hmm.
but out of all the books, I could see the fifth one being the least or the weak. You said the
Hmm.
weakest link,
Yeah, the
weakest.
weakest. And then I think another
Uh,
reason for that definitely is the fifth book is a transition, right?
yeah, it really is.
You go from Harry's every year adventure to a set consequence or set goal that they are working towards, and it is concrete.
Yeah.
They at that point in the book they're like, okay, or in the series, they're like, this is what is happening, this is what we need to do. And so it's a transition from the, youthfulness of Harry to okay, becoming an adult. And so yes, the book is good, the themes are great, and I understand it's just to me it wasn't my favorite to read.
The more that I think about it, and the more that we talk about it, I almost feel like Harry Potter actually suffers from something that we've talked about before in another series of books, um, the Night Angel trilogy. Like
Hmm.
the first 6 books are all building towards the kind of building, and then you've got the 7th book, and it literally deals with your climax and all your falling action in that one book.
Hmm.
Like, it just feels like it was kind of rushed to the end.
Well, and I say that's probably one of the downsides of longer series is that um, sometimes, especially for those longer series, the epilogue needs to not be a chapter. It needs to be an entire book. But most people don't want to read a book that is just an epilogue. So you
Well,
would. Sorry, go ahead.
uh, I was gonna say, think about Aragon, right?
Hmm.
Aragon was supposed to be 3 books, and he couldn't fit it in 3 books, so he made a 4th one.
Hmm. Which I never actually finished. I never finished
I
it.
don't, I don't know that I finished it either because it kind of got too convoluted.
Hmm. Yeah, and so like I mean, sometimes it's hard to balance that. Well, we need to tie up all the loose ends,
Hmm.
and we need to make it entertaining.
Right.
But at the same time, for certain people who are really invested in that story, they do want to see that play out. To them, that's not boring,
Right.
because I definitely my least favorite part of uh, of the final book of Harry Potter is that jump in time, where Harry's seeing his kids off to Hogwarts. Because to me, and because I loved that series, it's like, but you just skipped so much.
Right.
I would have loved to have seen that. And, I was just disappointed that I didn't get to. But
Right.
some people are more like, well, yeah, the story's done. What more are you gonna do? And you know, it's just a difference of opinion.
Uh, this is something I kind of want to wind down because it's getting close to 10:30,
Yeah.
and I've got to work tonight. But something maybe we could talk about in the next podcast. I know we really haven't done this before. Is kind of segue from podcast to podcast.
Hmm.
But one thing that I would really like to talk about, especially talking about books and novels and their relation to TV and stuff like that, one of the things I would really like to talk about is kind of like anime, versus the light novel,
Yeah.
slash versus the the manga,
Hmm.
because and I don't want to get too much into it this week because I want to talk about it next week, but like a lot of the anime that I've watched, like if I watch a good anime or if I see a good anime, I will then find the light novel because
Hmm.
usually the light novel was the original, not always,
Right.
but usually they have a light novel base, and a lot of the light novels that I've read just give so much more depth and
Hmm.
so much more character creation
Hmm.
um, to the story. But we can talk about that next week. Um,
The only thing I'm going to say about that is the perfect example, probably one we should talk about, is Sword Art Online.
uh-huh.
That is a probably a great example to use for that kind of thing. So I'm going to write that
I'm gonna.
down.
I love that anime, but I have to admit I've never read the light novel of that one.
Oh, you're missing out. Good
I
anime,
have. I
great book.
literally have. Um, literally right over there on my bookshelf, I have the first 3 light novels, and I've just never read them. I just I just that my Demon was talking about it the other day, talking about the Sword Art Online abridged,
Yeah.
and I the thing about it is, okay, so most anime that I watch that I want to read the light novel is because I want to know more about the world.
Hmm.
But to me, Sao, from just Sao, not into Gun Gale and all that stuff, but
Right.
just the original Sao was just so good to me.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but to me it was one of the first like full on like to me, like DBZ is a Japanese anime, a
Yeah.
Japanese manga, a Japanese, but growing up watching it, it didn't feel like it to me.
Hmm.
You know, it felt like I watched it on Toonami. I watched it on Cartoon Network. Like it didn't feel like a Japanese anime. It
Hmm.
wasn't in Japanese. I watched it in English. Sao was one of the first Japanese animes that I ever watched, and to me it was just so perfect that
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to tarnish it. You know what I mean? Because if I read the
Mm-hmm.
light novel, I'm gonna know the story better, but it'll tarnish my memories of the anime. In
Well,
my opinion, I hope it
yes,
doesn't.
yes and no. One of the things that if you read the books you'll notice,
Hmm.
that is, um, a lot of the side characters from the show aren't in there at all, or even mentioned.
Yeah.
So like the blacksmith, the dragon trainer, um, Yui, of course, a major character in the anime and in the books going forward, is not in the first book. Uh,
Right.
so that can feel kind of jarring, but I would say the first book out of okay, this is my opinion. Like I like the series, but in my opinion, the first book is the best because it is a complete story.
Okay.
You have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it is a complete story. Wasn't originally designed, I think, to be a series. He was just telling a story, which is why I like the first book better. There's no most stuff that is laid out has been tied, you know,
Right.
and and later on they have to start hinting at what's to come and stuff like that, and different things that can happen. And I just enjoyed the completeness of the first book. Sorry,
Well,
I know I
no,
know you
that's
said we
okay.
were winding down, and then I started in a new topic. So,
That's okay. You only added a couple extra minutes. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's something that we're interested in. It's something we're passionate about. Of course, we want to keep talking about it.
hmm
I mean, I could literally sit here all. If I didn't have to work tonight, I could sit here all day and just talk about anime and books and
hmm
novels and movies and TV, shows that I've watched and seen and enjoyed and stuff like that. Um, but I do have to work tonight, so
yeah. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, this was our podcast with Aeon Wraith and Red Shadow. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be uploading this to YouTube later at Aeon Wraith. It's the same as my Twitch because nobody ever takes my name, so sweet. Um,
say that too loud. They're liable to start taking it.
oh, they'll try. I've already hit every platform.
What's sad is when you try to get your name on YouTube, but you can't get it because somebody already has it and you know who it is. It's you, but you don't have access to that email or that phone number anymore.
Ah, the original Red Shadow 212. What a legend.
I know I made a YouTube channel a long time ago that was original like was Red Shadow 212 and I tried to get it and both I had I that email address, I know what the email address is, but I can't get into that email address because I can't get into that email address to reset my password for YouTube because that email address is a Yahoo account and the email address that I have and the phone number I have that are tied to that Yahoo account I no longer have access to
hmm
because that was my old phone number before I got the phone number that I've had for the last 6 years, 7
Yeah.
years. So, all right. Well, thank you
Uh,
ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen.
If anyone wants to know, Red Shadow's YouTube is Mr. Red Shadow 212. You can go to subscribe to him. He hasn't started uploading any stuff yet, but he
No,
will
I haven't
once.
uploaded any of the
Yeah.
podcasts yet.
He might once this is a more concrete thing. We are
Yeah,
still in the beginning
once we
stages.
go once
Yeah.
we go official with the podcast and give it its name, which we're pretty sure on, but we're not 100% sold on. Once we give the podcast its name and start episode 1, we're still in the testing phase. But once we set that up, I believe we said the first Sunday in March will be the
hmm
first full podcast. Then I will start uploading those to my YouTube channel as well. But the VODs are here on Twitch if you want to rewatch any of those.
Right. Spoiler, or not spoiler, warning. I was having technical difficulties for many of our early VODs, so I would tell you if you want to see our earlier conversations, head to Red Shadow's Twitch because they are better quality.
That's just because I was a little better with OBS. But you're learning. You're coming along
Yeah.
very, very well.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining. This is Aeon Wraith and Red Shadow. We're signing off now. Have a great day.
All right, I'm